Vortigern wasn't much to look at. Then again, not much on the lunar surface was. Imagine a concrete slab that someone decided to press the industrial eyesore button on, and you'd be halfway there. Most people called it home, though saying it with a straight face required a stiff drink, or two. Rylan Zephyr was elbow-deep in one of the city's beloved black hole reactors. Who'd have thought harnessing the power of cosmic death could be such a dull job? It was like watching paint dry, if the paint occasionally tried to liquefy your insides. It's like this thing has a personal vendetta against me, Rylan grumbled, wrestling a particularly stubborn power conduit. Sparks flew. Yep, definitely hates me. His partner in grime, Taran Delacroix, leaned against the wall, chewing on what might generously be called a sandwich. I dunno, Rylan. Maybe it just senses that burning desire to work you've got hidden deep inside. That's not desire, Taran, Rylan replied, wiping sweat with the back of his hand. It's indigestion from last night's synthale, Taran chuckled, a sound like a rusty hinge. Speaking of which, did you hear the latest special report from our esteemed governor? Apparently, there's an alien fleet heading our way. Rylan paused, which in this line of work could be the last thing you ever did. An alien fleet. Like in those old vids where they come in, zap us all, and steal our resources. Exactly, Taran nodded sagely. Except this time maybe they'll just take our jobs. Rylan laughed, a short bark of humorless amusement. Right, cause the intergalactic unemployment rate sky high. What a time to be alive. The reactor hummed ominously, a reminder that if things went sideways, they'd be the first to know. They always were. Just then their comms crackled to life. It was the voice of Supervisor Griggs, the kind of guy who'd make a funeral procession seem lively. Zephyr, Delacroix, report to the command hub immediately. We need every capable hand on deck. Rylan shared a glance with Taran, both shrugging like they were heading to a dentist appointment. Command hub meetings were only marginally less painful. The hub was as grim as the rest of the city, filled with screens and stressed-out faces. They were greeted by Griggs, who looked like he'd slept in his clothes. Glad you two could make it. We've got a situation. Is it about the alien fleet? Rylan asked, trying to sound interested. Griggs rubbed his temples. No, it's about the coffee machine. Of course, it's the alien fleet. They're still a few light years out, but we need to prepare. Prepare how? Taran interjected. We barely have enough resources to keep the lights on. Griggs gave them a look that could curdle milk. We need to double down on reactor output. Like it or not, Vortigern is our last line of defense. Lovely, Rylan muttered. Nothing like a little cosmic doom to spice up a Thursday. Griggs glanced around the room, lowering his voice. And you might want to keep an eye on the citizens. Word's spreading, and it's not doing wonders for morale. Rylan nodded, thinking about the last time morale and Vortigern were used in the same sentence. It was probably before the city had been built. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, they were left with their thoughts, and the uncomfortable sensation that came with knowing the universe might have it out for them. Life on the moon was never dull. Bleak, sure, but never dull. Back in the reactor room, Rylan continued his battle with the finicky machinery. You know, Taran, if those aliens do show up, maybe they'll take pity on us, Taran snorted. Right. They'll see our charming lunar abode and think, these poor bastards, let's give them a break. The reactor emitted a sound that could best be described as a groan. It was like it was in on the joke, or maybe even the punchline. Suddenly, emergency alarms blared, cutting through the tension like a knife through stale bread. Attention! All personnel report to the closest shelter immediately. Rylan exchanged a look with Taran. And here I thought today would be boring. They dropped their tools and ran. The corridors of Vortigern were a blur, filled with panicked faces and a rising tide of anxiety. It was like a bad day at a doomed amusement park. As they reached the shelter, the doors slammed shut behind them. People huddled together, whispering nervously. It was a sea of apprehension, every face a reflection of worry. All right, folks, a voice crackled over the intercom. We've just received confirmation. The alien fleet has accelerated. They'll be in our neighborhood sooner than expected. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Rylan leaned back against the cold metal wall, trying to appear unfazed. "Looks like we might get our close encounter after all," Taran said, attempting a smile. Rylan nodded, crossing his arms. "I just hope they've got a better menu than Vortican's cafeteria." And as the shelter hummed with fear and anticipation, one thing was clear. Life in Vortican was about to get a lot more interesting, for better or worse. The lights flickered, adding to the atmosphere of impending doom. It wasn't a power cut, more like the system itself was anxious. "Any bets on whether they'll be friendly?" Rylan asked, trying to lighten the mood. Someone nearby grumbled, "I just hope they've got something stronger than synthale." The shelter doors slid open with a hiss and Griggs stepped in, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past Ior. "All right, everyone, listen up. We're going to need volunteers for a recon team." Rylan groaned internally. "Volunteering? That's a nice way to say suicide mission, isn't it?" Taran elbowed him. "You know you're going to sign up." Yeah, I know. Someone's got to report back on what flavor of doom we're about to face." Griggs continued, "We need people willing to scout the outer sectors, find out what we're dealing with and try not to get obliterated in the process." A few hands went up reluctantly. Rylan's was among them. "Good," Griggs nodded, relief in his voice. "The rest of you stay put. We'll need everyone ready once we know what we're up against." Rylan and the other volunteers were whisked away, the reality of their situation settling in like a bad cold. The corridors seemed narrower, the air heavier. "So," Taran said as they suited up, "what do you think these aliens want?" "If they're anything like us," Rylan replied, checking his gear, "probably just a quiet place to crash and a decent meal." Or, Taran countered, "they're here to make us all into cosmic soup." "True," Rylan conceded, "but at least soup is warm." They boarded a battered transport ship, the kind that looked like it had seen too many bad days and not enough good ones. The engines groaned to life, and soon they were off, leaving the safety of Vortican's underwhelming embrace. The ship rattled through the void, the tension palpable. Rylan tried to quell the nervous energy by imagining what kind of alien life awaited them. "Maybe they'll be giant, fluffy beings who communicate through interpretive dance," he mused aloud. Taran laughed. "If that's the case, we're sending you out first." The laughter was a welcome break from the oppressive silence that followed, but as they neared the outer sectors, humor was replaced by the stark reality of their mission. "All right," Rylan said, as he steeled himself for whatever awaited them. "Let's hope they're more interested in conversation than conquest." The ship shuddered to a halt, and the crew geared up to face the unknown. As the hatch opened, Rylan took a deep breath, ready to meet his fate with his usual blend of sarcasm and a complete lack of preparation. The universe had thrown them a curveball, and like it or not, they were up to bat. As the first glimpse of the alien fleet came into view, Rylan couldn't help but smile wryly to himself. "Here's hoping they're just here for the food." And with that, they stepped out into the great unknown, ready to greet whatever cosmic joke the universe had in store with open arms. Rylan Zephyr had faced a lot of questionable days since he started working with black hole reactors, but this one was shaping up to take the dubious cake. As their ship floated toward the edge of Vortican's airspace, he spotted the alien fleet that seemed to have a thing for dramatic entrances. It was hard not to admire their punctuality, even if it came with the subtext of imminent doom. "Better than anything in the movies, huh?" Taran remarked, squinting at the massive shapes growing larger against the backdrop of stars. "Bet they don't even have to pay taxes." Rylan grinned despite himself. "Yeah, and they probably don't have to file reports on reactor maintenance either." The alien fleet, a collection of sleek, unidentifiable ships, sent out a series of probes, little mechanical eyes darting across the lunar surface. They had a menacingly inquisitive look about them, like the universe's worst-kept secret had just been revealed. Humans were the monkeys in the cosmic zoo. "Think they are here for the reactors?" Taran asked, her voice barely masking a note of genuine concern. "Wouldn't blame him," Rylan replied. If I were an alien, I'd be curious about the colossal human blunder of trying to harness black holes on the moon. Their ship's comms buzzed with new orders. Recon was over, and they needed to head back. Apparently, the supervisors wanted Rylan and Taran to do what they did best: mess with the dangerous, volatile machinery that could obliterate them at any moment. As they docked back at Vortican, the city didn't look half as welcoming as it once did, which was saying something. The industrial sprawl was now overshadowed by the imminent threat hanging above them like a cosmic sword of Damocles. Griggs was waiting for them at the command hub, looking more disheveled than ever. "Zephyr, Delacroix, we've got anomalies in the reactor readouts. I need you two to check it out." "Anomalies?" Taran's eyebrow shot up. "Like, oops, we accidentally created a wormhole to hell kind of anomalies. Let's hope not." Griggs sighed, rubbing his temples. "But these probes have been snooping around the reactors. I don't like it." Rylan exchanged a glance with Taran. "Great, now the aliens are critics too." As they headed to the reactor, Rylan felt the familiar chill of entering a place where things could go catastrophically wrong at any moment. The reactor hummed with its usual ominous energy, a temperamental beast just waiting for an excuse to blow. "Okay," Rylan murmured, pulling up the diagnostic screen. "Let's see what's got you in a twist." The data flow was erratic, a series of peaks and troughs that made no sense whatsoever. It was like trying to read a lie detector test from someone having a panic attack. "Looks like those probes did more than just sightsee," Taran said, tapping the screen. "We've got fluctuations here that shouldn't be possible." "Sabotage, you think?" Rylan asked, though he already knew the answer. It was the kind of question you asked when you hoped for an answer you wouldn't get. "Either that," Taran said, "or the reactors developed a personality disorder." Rylan pulled up the core schematics, their digital lines weaving a labyrinthine pattern across the screen. "Look here, there's a spike in the gravitational constants. If this keeps up, we're going to have a meltdown on our hands." "Perfect," Taran said dryly. "Always wanted to experience being vaporized from the inside out." They worked quickly, fingers dancing over the controls, trying to stabilize the reactor's temperamental heart. The hum of machinery filled the room, a choir of potential disaster. "We need to isolate the source of the interference," Rylan said, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "If we can't cut it off, we're toast." "Already on it," Taran replied, her focus razor-sharp as she navigated the reactor's interface. "Damn aliens are like kids with a new toy. They can't stop poking at it." Rylan nodded, trying to ignore the ominous creaks and groans of the reactor as it buckled under the strain. He was used to working under pressure, but this was something else. This was the kind of high-stakes poker where losing meant more than just being out of pocket. It meant being out of existence. "Got it," Taran shouted after what felt like an eternity. "I've isolated the signal, shutting it down now." With a series of keystrokes, the reactor's erratic behavior began to settle, the readings slowly returning to normal. The hum of the machinery softened, no longer a death knell but a steady, reassuring thrum. "Nice work," Rylan breathed, relief washing over him. "But what the hell do these aliens want with our reactors?" "Beats me," Taran shrugged, leaning back in her chair. "Maybe they're here for the show. You know, watch humans dance around their own stupidity." Rylan chuckled, the sound tinged with exhaustion. Wouldn't be the first time. Still, they weren't out of the woods yet. The alien probes were still out there, and who knew what kind of mischief they were getting up to. One thing was certain: they couldn't afford another close call like this. As they left the reactor room, the bleak corridors of Vortican seemed even more oppressive. Around them, the city buzzed with a nervous energy, the tension palpable. "So," Taran mused as they walked, "what's the plan? Wait for the aliens to get bored and go home?" "Pretty much," Rylan replied. "We keep the reactors running and hope they lose interest, or, we get a miracle intervention." "Always the optimist," Taran said with a grin. "That's what I like about you." They made their way back to the command hub, the atmosphere thick with anxiety. Griggs was waiting, his expression grim but resolute. "Status?" he asked as soon as they entered. We managed to stabilize the reactor, Rylan reported. But those probes are still a problem. We need a way to disrupt their signals, keep them out of our systems. Griggs nodded, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. I'll see what we can do. In the meantime, we need to get the word out to the rest of the city. We can't afford any more surprises. Got it, Taran said. We'll keep an eye on things down here. As they headed back to the reactor room, Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The universe was playing a dangerous game and they were the pawns on the board. Think we'll make it out of this one? Taran asked as they resumed their positions. Who knows? Rylan replied with a shrug. But hey, at least we'll go out with a bang. The reactor hummed steadily, a reminder of the delicate balance they were maintaining. For now, things were stable. But in the world they lived in, stability was just another word for temporary peace. As they settled in for another long shift, Rylan couldn't help but wonder how it would all end. If the aliens were here for the reactors, then they had a vested interest in keeping them running, or they wanted to see them fail spectacularly. Either way, Rylan thought with a wry smile, it was all in a day's work. The Iors crept by, and the city remained on high alert. News of the alien fleet spread quickly, and though the official line was one of calm and control, the reality was anything but. People whispered in pockets of shadows, trading conspiracy theories like currency. In the reactor control room, Rylan and Taran were managing as best they could, trying to keep a lid on the situation. The aliens were still out there, and every now and then a probe would swoop by, scanning the lunar surface with unsettling precision. I swear, Taran muttered, eyes glued to the monitors, if one of those things gets any closer, I'm gonna start charging him rent. Maybe we should set up a toll booth, Rylan suggested, half joking. Make him pay for the privilege of poking around our reactors. Outside, the hum of activity continued, the city operating under a blanket of unease. The alien fleet hung in the sky, a constant reminder that their world was on borrowed time. Yet, despite the looming threat, life in Vortican went on. People still argued over the best brand of synthale, still complained about the weather, still lived and loved and fought like there was no tomorrow, because, for all they knew, there might not be. Rylan couldn't help but feel a certain admiration for the human spirit, stubborn, unyielding, and wonderfully reckless. Even in the face of cosmic annihilation, they persevered. It was either inspiring or insane. He hadn't decided which yet. Think they'll make contact? Taran asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Dunno, Rylan said, leaning back in his chair. But if they do, I hope they bring cookies. I'm starving. Amidst the tension, there was a certain camaraderie, a shared understanding that they were all in this mess together. And as the Iors ticked by, Rylan found a strange comfort in that. If the aliens were going to bring hell to their doorstep, at least they'd face it with a laugh. Okay, Rylan said, forcing himself to focus. Let's run another diagnostic. Make sure nothing's gone sideways since the last check. Taran nodded, her fingers flying over the keys. The reactor's readouts flickered to life, a complex symphony of numbers and graphs that seemed to taunt them with their unpredictability. Everything looks stable, Taran reported, though her voice was tinged with skepticism. For now, anyway. Great, Rylan replied, stifling a yawn. Let's hope it stays that way. As they settled in for another long night, Rylan knew that whatever happened, they'd meet it head-on. They were human, after all, flawed, tenacious, and just crazy enough to believe they might survive. And if the universe had other plans, well, it would have to wait its turn. The reactor room hummed with its usual threatening energy, like a grumpy old uncle with a penchant for random explosions. Rylan and Taran stood in the epicenter of this mechanical misery, monitoring the data that blinked erratically across their screens. The air was thick, with the pungent scent of burnt wiring and unfulfilled dreams. I swear, Taran said, waving a hand in front of her face as if to bat away the stench, if the smell doesn't kill us, the reactor will. Or the aliens, Rylan added, eyes fixed on the numbers dancing about like drunken fireflies. Don't forget the aliens. Right, our esteemed interstellar guests, she replied, rolling her eyes. I keep thinking one day they'll pop in for tea and biscuits. Ryland smirked. I'd settle for them not poking our reactors with cosmic sticks. A loud bang echoed through the corridors, followed by the unsettling flicker of the overhead lights. It was the kind of sound that made even the bravest technician consider a career in something less life-threatening, like babysitting rabid wolves. What the hell was that? Taryn muttered, her fingers already flying over the keyboard to pull up diagnostics. Probably just the reactor saying hello, Ryland shrugged, or goodbye, depending on its mood. The system displayed a new data spike, a jagged line that shot upwards like a middle finger to their efforts at control. Ryland tapped the screen, half hoping it would magically correct itself, but knowing full well that hope was a fool's currency in Vortican. We've got another surge in Sector 7, he said, gesturing to the offending graph. This thing's about as stable as a two-legged table. We need to get in there, see what's causing it, Taryn asserted, already donning a protective suit. Who knows? Maybe we'll find a family of squirds nesting in the core. Wouldn't surprise me, Ryland replied, pulling on his own suit. Though I'm more worried about what the radiation's doing to us. I read somewhere it could turn you into a glowing freak. They secured their helmets, the seals hissing as they locked into place. Ryland's voice echoed slightly in his own ears, a reminder of how tenuous their grip on safety was. On the bright side, Taryn said, her voice crackling over the intercom, maybe we'll develop superpowers. Great, Ryland deadpanned. I've always wanted to glow in the dark. They moved cautiously through the winding corridors of the reactor complex, each step taking them deeper into a labyrinth of potential catastrophe. The sector was marked by warning signs, their bright colors faded from countless close calls and dodged disasters. Inside, the reactor thrummed with a malevolent energy, its core pulsating like the heart of a cosmic beast. Ryland could almost feel the radiation probing at his skin, testing his resolve. Diagnostics show a spike right over there, Taryn pointed, indicating a panel that looked about as trustworthy as a politician's promise. Ryland approached it, his toolkit clattering as he knelt. You know, some days I wonder why I even bother. Because you love the adrenaline rush of almost dying, Taryn quipped, her own toolkit slung over her shoulder. And of course, the glamour of high-risk engineering. Right, Ryland murmured, prying open the panel to reveal a mess of cables and machinery that looked more like a bird's nest than sophisticated technology. Remind me to thank the guy who designed this. They worked in silence, the air vibrating with the reactor's rhythmic pulses. Ryland could feel the sweat pooling inside his suit, a clammy reminder of the thin line between competence and calamity. Okay, he said, making an adjustment that seemed as likely to fix the problem as it was to make it worse. Let's see if that does anything. The reactor hummed a moment longer before the readouts began to stabilize, the spikes smoothing into something that resembled order, or at least a temporary ceasefire. Not bad, Taryn nodded, inspecting the monitors with a critical eye. We might survive the day yet, Ryland grinned, though it was hidden behind his helmet. Who knew fiddling with high-tech equipment would turn me into a hero? Don't get too comfortable, Taryn warned, heading back towards the entrance. There's still plenty of time for things to go wrong. Back in the control room, the data had settled into a pattern that didn't scream imminent demise, which, by their standards, was practically a holiday. Seems like we've got this under control, Ryland said, stripping off his suit. For now, at least. Yeah, Taryn agreed, though there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. But I can't help thinking about what Griggs mentioned. Humans thriving in radiation zones. There's something off about it. Ryland nodded, sinking into his chair. Like maybe we're evolving into something the aliens find fascinating, or something they want to exploit, she suggested. I mean, if we're thriving in conditions that should kill us, it's not exactly normal, is it? Normal, Ryland mused, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. That's a word that doesn't belong anywhere near our lives. They fell into a contemplative silence, the hum of the reactor a constant reminder of the precarious edge they danced upon. "You think the aliens are watching us for that reason?" Taran asked, breaking the quiet. "Studying our resilience?" "Could be," Rylan replied, though skepticism laced his voice. "Or maybe they're just bored. We're the monkeys in their cosmic zoo, after all." Taran chuckled. "Well, they picked the wrong exhibit if they're looking for an easy show. We're stubborn, remember. Stubborn and slightly radioactive," Rylan added. "A real winning combo." Despite the dark humor, the thought lingered like an unwelcome guest. If the aliens were indeed interested in human adaptability, it meant their presence wasn't a passing curiosity. It was a prelude to something much larger. "Think we should tell Griggs?" Taran asked, her tone half serious. "I mean, he loves a good conspiracy theory." "Yeah, and he'd probably file it under things that will ruin my day," Rylan quipped. "But it might be worth mentioning." With the reactor stable and their curiosity piqued, they made their way back to the command hub, the corridors echoing with the distant rumble of machinery and the occasional blare of alarms, a symphony of controlled chaos. Griggs was hunched over a console, his expression a mix of exhaustion and resignation. It was a look Rylan knew well, the face of a man who'd seen too much and was paid too little. "Griggs," Rylan called, leaning against the doorway. "Got a minute?" The supervisor glanced up, dark circles under his eyes a testament to the stress of keeping a city from imploding. "What is it now? Don't tell me the reactor's about to blow again." "Not this time," Taran assured him, stepping forward. "We've got it stable, but there's something else. We were talking about the humans thriving in radiation zones." Griggs raised an eyebrow, a rare flicker of interest crossing his features. "Yeah, I heard about that. Strange, isn't it?" "Very," Rylan agreed. "We think the aliens might be interested in that, maybe more than just our reactors." Griggs sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Great, just what I needed." "More alien intrigue." "Could be nothing," Taran offered, though her tone suggested she didn't quite believe it. "But if it's not, we should be prepared." "Prepared for what exactly?" Griggs asked, sarcasm dripping from his words. "An interstellar science fair." "Just aware," Rylan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We're not sure what they are after, but if we're an enigma, they might take more than a passing interest." Griggs nodded slowly, the gears in his mind visibly turning. "All right, I'll look into it, but let's keep this between us for now. Last thing we need is a city-wide panic." "Understood," Taran replied, shooting Rylan a sideways glance. "We've got enough to deal with." "More than enough," Rylan echoed, pushing off the wall and heading back towards the reactor control room. "Let's just hope we can keep it from blowing up in our faces." Back at their consoles, the world outside continued its anxious buzz, unaware of the potential implications hanging over them like a guillotine. The alien fleet still loomed, a silent promise of either discovery or devastation. "Well," Taran said, resuming her seat, "at least our lives aren't boring." "Boring would be nice," Rylan countered, though he knew he'd miss the chaos. "But I guess we've got front-row seats to the end of the world." "Maybe," Taran agreed, a smile playing on her lips. "But if it is the end, we'll make sure to give one hell of a performance." Rylan chuckled, the sound mingling with the steady hum of the reactor. They might be facing the unknown, dancing on the edge of existence, but they'd do it with style, sarcasm, and maybe a touch of radioactive glow. And if the universe wanted to watch, well, it was in for a treat. The alien fleet hung over Vortican like a bad omen, casting shadows on the city's already gloomy skyline. Rylan Zephyr squinted through the command hub's viewport, taking in the sight that would make optimists cry and realists nod knowingly. The aliens were finally making their move, and it was as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. "Well, there goes the neighborhood," Rylan muttered, turning back to the mess of screens and blinking lights that defined his workstation. The command hub hummed with frantic energy, the tension thick enough to cut with a safety knife. Taran Delacroix, ever the optimist in a world determined to prove her wrong, leaned against the console beside him. "Think they'll offer us a welcome basket, or just start with the laser beams?" "Given our luck, probably one and then the other," Rylan replied, his fingers dancing over the controls. Griggs is gonna love this. Speak of the devil, Supervisor Griggs chose that moment to shuffle in, his hair sticking up at odd angles, as though it was also trying to escape the impending disaster. He took one look at the chaos, groaned like a man who'd just been told he had to work overtime at his own funeral, and shuffled over to join them. "Status?" Griggs asked, his voice carrying the weariness of too many years dealing with people who consider "don't blow up the city" an optional part of their job description. "We've got a full-blown alien invasion on our hands," Ryland said, gesturing to the screens filled with images of the alien fleet. "It's a bit of a bother." "Just a bit," Taran added, never missing an opportunity to sprinkle in some dry humor. "A minor inconvenience, really." Griggs rubbed his temples, as if hoping to massage out the stress threatening to split his skull. "What's the plan?" Rylan exchanged a glance with Taran, the kind of look that could lose a staring contest with a loaded gun. "Well, since surrendering isn't in our vocabulary, I was thinking we improvise." Taran snorted. "Improvise? That's the strategy." "Hey, it's worked for us before," Rylan shot back, defending his favorite tactic. "Besides, we're good at making stuff up on the fly." "And when that fails?" Griggs asked, sounding like a man already resigned to writing his own obituary. "We die creatively," Rylan replied, tapping a few buttons to pull up their power grid schematics. "But before that, we'll make sure they remember us." They launched into a rapid-fire brainstorming session, tossing out ideas like half-baked cookies, hoping one might actually stick. With each plan, they faced the harsh reality of their situation. Resources were scarce, time even more so, and their adversaries had more firepower than a disgruntled armory. "All right," Taran said, pulling up a 3D model of Vortican and the surrounding area. "We've got two main objectives: keep the city powered and avoid becoming alien toast." Griggs nodded, the bags under his eyes doing their best impression of the reactor room's shadowy corners. "And how do we do that without getting ourselves killed?" Rylan grinned, though it was more of a grimace by the time it reached his eyes. "We utilize the only thing in our favor, the reactor." "That's insane," Griggs remarked, though there was a hint of admiration in his voice. "We could blow ourselves sky high." "We could," Rylan admitted. "But we won't. We've got you, remember. You're the king of not dying in fiery explosions." Griggs sighed, the weight of reluctant leadership settling over him once more. "Fine. But if this goes south, I'm haunting you both." "Deal," Taran said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now let's get to work before they realize we're too lazy to evacuate." They split up, each diving into their respective tasks with the kind of grim determination that came from knowing failure wasn't just an option, it was the default setting. Rylan focused on the reactor, tweaking its output to maximize energy while minimizing the chance of combustion. It was like trying to balance a scale made entirely of bad ideas. Meanwhile, Taran coordinated with the other technicians, setting up makeshift defenses around Vortican's most vital components. They rigged every available power source, turning the city into a glowing fortress, daring the aliens to come closer and test their improvised defenses, or die laughing at the absurdity. "Got the power grid linked," Rylan reported, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If they try to take out the reactor, we'll give them a show they won't forget." "Just make sure it's not the last show we ever put on," Taran replied, her voice crackling over the intercom. "I'd hate to miss the encore." They were interrupted by a series of alarms blaring through the hub, the sound akin to 1,000 angry cats being launched into space. Rylan glanced at the monitors to see a new wave of alien ships descending towards them, their intentions as friendly as a mugging in a dark alley. "Looks like they've RSVP'd," Rylan said, pulling up the targeting systems. "Let's make them feel welcome." Taran's voice was firm, underlined with a confidence that came from knowing she had nothing left to lose. "All units, engage defensive protocols. Remember, aim for the glowing bits. They hate that." As the first ships entered their airspace, Vortican's defenses lit up like a holiday display gone terribly wrong. Energy beams leapt from rooftop turrets, arcs of electricity lashing out at the alien invaders with all the subtlety of a bar brawl. Rylan watched the chaos unfold, fingers flying over controls as he directed power surges to key points. "Take that, you cosmic voyeurs," he muttered, adjusting the reactor output to prevent a meltdown. The aliens responded in kind, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire that streaked across the sky, painting it with hues of impending doom. The ground shook with the impact, each hit a reminder of their precarious situation. "Status on the reactor," Taran called, her voice a beacon of focus amidst the cacophony. "Stable for the moment," Rylan replied, though his eyes never left the monitors. "But it's a fine line between stable and smoking crater." "Just keep it together," Griggs chimed in, his tone suggesting he was more than ready to retire if they survived. "We've got this." As the battle raged on, Rylan and Taran continued their delicate dance with death, coordinating attacks and defenses with the kind of synergy only found between people who'd long since stopped caring about little things like personal safety. They pushed the reactor to its limits, using every ounce of power it could muster to fend off the alien onslaught. "How are we holding up?" Rylan asked. "Like a paper mache fortress in a hurricane," Taran replied, her eyes flicking between screens as she rerouted power to collapsing sectors. "But we're still here." The alien fleet seemed to sense their determination, or maybe they just got bored, and began to pull back, their retreat as sudden as their attack. Rylan watched in disbelief as the ships disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind only the acrid smell of burnt circuitry and the lingering threat of their return. "Are they retreating?" Griggs asked, incredulity coloring his voice. "Looks like it," Rylan confirmed, allowing himself a moment of relief. "Guess they didn't like the welcome party." Taran slumped into her chair, exhaustion draping over her like a heavy cloak. "Well, I'd say that was a success." "Success?" Griggs echoed, eyeing the damage reports with a critical eye. "We barely held on." Rylan chuckled, the sound more than a bit manic. "Hey, barely is still winning in my book." They set about assessing the damage, cataloging the extensive repairs needed to keep Vortican from crumbling under its own weight. The aliens might have retreated, but they'd be back, and next time Vortican might not be so lucky. "Think they'll return?" Taran asked, her voice soft, almost hopeful for a bit of normalcy. "Definitely," Rylan replied, his tone resigned but not defeated. "But we'll be ready," Griggs sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll start planning for that. And maybe, just maybe, we won't all die horribly." "Optimism looks good on you, Griggs," Taran teased, rising from her seat to stretch out the kinks of a long, stressful day. "Don't get used to it," Griggs replied, a hint of a smile breaking through his usual dour demeanor. The city of Vortican settled into an uneasy calm, the threat of alien return hanging over them like an unclaimed debt. But for now, they'd survived, and in a world teetering on the brink, that was no small feat. Rylan leaned back, closing his eyes just for a moment, savoring the brief respite. "You know, if we keep this up, we might just become legends." Taran laughed, a sound like music amidst the chaos. "Or cautionary tales. Either way, it's one hell of a ride," Rylan said, opening his eyes to the damaged yet defiant city they called home. As they prepared for whatever came next, one thing was certain. They'd meet it head-on, with sarcasm sharp and wit sharper, ready to face the universe and all its challenges. And if the aliens wanted a show, well, they'd just have to bring their own popcorn. The command hub felt like a pressure cooker, and Rylan Zephyr was the lone potato slowly losing his skin. He leaned back in his chair, surveying the screens in front of him, each one a vomit-inducing display of bad news. The alien fleet had breached several key defenses, leaving Vortican's supposedly impenetrable shield as useful as a paper umbrella in a monsoon. "Well, isn't this a delightful cluster of chaos?" Rylan muttered, watching the red blips on the monitor multiply like rabbits on a particularly romantic weekend. Taran Delacroix, ever the ray of sarcastic sunshine, was perched next to him, tapping furiously at her console. Looks like our alien guests decided to RSVP after all. I hope they brought snacks, Ryland snorted, though there wasn't much humor behind it. Yeah, and I bet it's the kind of snacks that end with us in body bags. Griggs, their beleaguered supervisor, shuffled in, looking more like a man on the brink of a midlife crisis than ever. What's the situation? Same old, Ryland replied, his voice dripping with irony. Aliens attacking, defenses failing, us on the verge of a nervous breakdown. You know, the usual. Griggs sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. God, I miss the days when the biggest threat was someone spilling coffee on the control panel. Don't worry, Griggs, Taran chimed in. We'll be wishing for coffee spills again soon enough. Right after these aliens finish redecorating Vortican with plasma fire. As if on cue, another alarm blared, signaling yet another breach. Ryland punched a few keys, trying to reroute power to the failing sections. It was like trying to plug leaks in a sinking ship with bubble gum. How's the reactor holding up? Griggs asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Like a teenager on prom night, nervous and likely to explode at any moment, Ryland replied, eyes glued to the readouts. Griggs grimaced, clearly regretting every life choice that had led him to this moment. Well, keep it together, or we'll all end up as cosmic dust. Inspiring pep talk, Griggs, Taran noted, not even looking up from her screen. Have you considered motivational speaking as a career? Only if it comes with a pension and a beach house, Griggs shot back, though the effort to sound jovial fell flat. Ryland tried not to think about how dire things had become. The aliens had stomped through their defenses like they'd been made of wet cardboard. Morale was lower than a snake's belly, and he couldn't help but feel like they were fighting a losing battle. Any bright ideas? Griggs asked, more out of habit than hope. Ryland chuckled darkly. If I had a bright idea, I'd bottle it, sell it, and retire to the far side of the galaxy. Taran sighed, her fingers pausing over the keys. Come on, Ryland, there must be something we haven't tried. Short of asking the aliens to kindly bugger off, I'm stumped, Ryland admitted, slumping back in his chair. But then they don't seem the polite type. As if to underscore his point, another boom resonated through the hub, causing the lights to flicker ominously. Wonderful, Taran said, glaring at the ceiling. Now they're playing with the lighting. What's next? Incense and mood music. Ryland had to admit, defeat felt like a heavy cloak draped around his shoulders. The odds were stacked higher than the command hub's snack pile, and it was hard to see a way out that didn't involve a body count. But then, in the midst of the gloom, an unexpected alert flashed across Ryland's console. Something about radiation levels and anomalies. Normally, he'd dismiss it as just another sign of their impending doom, but desperate times called for desperate curiosity. What's this? He murmured, pulling up the data. As he scanned the information, his exhaustion-fogged brain slowly connected the dots. Taran, get a load of this. Taran leaned over, peering at the screen. Radiation levels. I thought we were trying to avoid growing an extra head. Yeah, but look, Ryland persisted, pointing at the data. These readings suggest that humans might have some weird adaptability to the radiation. Griggs raised an eyebrow. Meaning, Ryland hesitated, excitement mingling with disbelief. We might be able to use the reactor's radiation to give us a temporary edge against the aliens. Taran blinked, processing the implications. Are you saying we could weaponize our own adaptability? Ryland nodded slowly, the idea taking shape like a half-remembered dream. It's a long shot, but at this point, long shots are all we've got. Griggs rubbed his chin, the hint of a grin tugging at his lips for the first time in Iors. If it works, we might just turn the tables. And if it doesn't, well, we die in spectacular fashion, Taran finished, her smile grim but genuine. And at least we'll have tried. With renewed determination, Ryland and Taran set to work, diving into the reactor's schematics in search of a way to manipulate its output. It was a delicate operation, requiring the precision of a surgeon and the insanity of a mad scientist. "How's it coming?" Griggs asked, hovering behind them like a nervous parent before a school play. "We're about to find out if humans can survive being microwaved," Rylan replied, tweaking the reactor's controls with all the confidence of a gambler on a losing streak. "No pressure, right?" Taryn quipped, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. "Just the fate of the city riding on our shoulders." "Relax," Rylan said, grinning despite himself. "What's the worst that could happen?" "Is that rhetorical, or do you want the list alphabetically?" Griggs replied, eyeing the reactor's readouts. As Rylan made the final adjustments, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. Maybe they could show the aliens that humans were more than just cosmic cannon fodder. "Ready?" Taryn asked, her voice steady despite the tension. "As I'll ever be," Rylan replied, fingers hovering over the controls. Griggs took a deep breath, his expression one of weary resolve. "Let's give these bastards a taste of human ingenuity." With a final nod, Rylan activated the sequence, sending a surge of radiation through the reactor. The hub hummed with power, the air crackling with energy as the plan was set into motion. "Here goes nothing," Rylan muttered, watching the screens intently. The radiation levels spiked, flooding the city with a pulse of energy that was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, the abyss yawning below, yet feeling the exhilaration of flight. "Radiation levels holding," Taryn reported, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It's working." Griggs let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Now let's hope this gives us the edge we need." As the radiation flowed through Vortican, reports trickled in from across the city. The aliens, it seemed, weren't quite as adaptable as their human counterparts. Their systems were scrambling, their formations faltering. "Looks like they're not enjoying the radiation bath," Rylan observed, a hint of triumph in his voice. Taryn grinned, leaning back in her chair. "Guess they didn't read the fine print on our welcome package." The alien retreat was gradual at first, then more pronounced as they scrambled to regroup. Rylan felt a surge of vindication, like a gambler who'd bet it all on a losing hand only to watch the house fold. "We did it," Griggs said, a note of awe in his voice. "We actually did it. For now," Rylan cautioned, though he couldn't hide the smile on his face. "But they'll be back, and next time they'll be ready." Taryn shrugged, her eyes sparkling with defiance. "Then we'll just have to be ready too." As the immediate threat dissipated, the command hub settled into a quiet hum, the screens showing less red and more green. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and Rylan knew they'd need every bit of morale to face what came next. Griggs, for his part, looked like a man reborn, his earlier despair replaced with a weary kind of hope. "I'll start working on fortifying our defenses. We might have a chance to turn this around." Rylan nodded, feeling the weight of possibility on his shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but one he was willing to carry. "Let's make sure we do." Taryn stretched, letting out a long sigh of relief. "I don't know about you guys, but I could use a drink after all this." "Make it two," Rylan agreed, already fantasizing about the burn of cheap liquor. Griggs chuckled, the sound surprisingly light. "Just save some for me, or I'll haunt you both." They laughed, the tension easing as they embraced the brief respite. The future was uncertain, and the threat of the alien return loomed like a storm on the horizon. But for now, they'd seized a small victory, and in the grand scheme of their grim universe, that was enough. And so, with sarcasm as their shield and grim determination as their sword, they prepared to face whatever came next. Because in the end, humans were nothing if not survivors. And if the universe wanted a fight, Rylan and his crew were more than willing to oblige. The command hub was a buzzing hive of desperate energy. Screens flickered like disco lights at a rundown nightclub, each flash a reminder that death was strutting its stuff outside. Rylan Zephyr was sitting at his console, which was about as stable as a politician's promise, and about as useful as a chocolate teapot. He was supposed to be monitoring the reactor, but his attention kept drifting. The aliens were still out there, and the Vortican defenses were about as effective as wet tissue paper. Taran Delacroix, Ryland's colleague, was tapping away at her console like she was trying to type her way out of a jail cell. Her sarcasm was as sharp as ever, the only weapon they had that didn't run out of ammo. "You know, I've always wanted to be the last human alive." "A real pioneer of solitude," she remarked, barely glancing up from her screen. "Better hope the last bottle of scotch survives with you," Ryland replied, trying to keep his own voice light. "I'm pretty sure that's the only thing that'll make it bearable. Scotch and a bulletproof bunker," Taran said with a dry chuckle. "Preferably not in that order." Supervisor Griggs was skulking around, looking like a man who'd lost a bet with a particularly malevolent deity. He kept rubbing his temples as if hoping to massage the chaos away. "All right, team," he said, using that tone managers reserve for when they pretend to have a plan. "Let's talk about this. Weaponized adaptability idea." Ryland sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We take the reactor's radiation, tweak it, and throw it at the aliens. Simple as baking a cake if the cake was made of plutonium and nightmares." Taran snorted. "And if it fails, we just irradiate ourselves, which is basically a win-win, right?" Griggs didn't look convinced. "And how exactly do we throw this?" "What mutant radiation at them? That's the fun part," Ryland said, spinning around in his chair to face Griggs, arms crossed. "We use the city's black hole reactors. They are unstable as hell, but if we can figure out a way to channel the output, we might just scramble the alien systems enough to make a difference." Griggs nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards in what might have been encouragement or a mild stroke. "Okay, let's say we can do this without turning Vortican into a glowing crater. What's the plan?" Taran leaned back, crossing her arms. "We lure them in, make them think they've got us cornered. Then boom, we hit them with the radiation. It's basically the interstellar equivalent of a sucker punch." "Or a kamikaze," Ryland added. "Depending on your perspective." Griggs sighed, the sound full of a kind of weary acceptance of insanity. "All right, let's give it a shot. Worst case, we don't live long enough to hear 'I told you so.'" With a newfound sense of purpose, or at least a renewed sense of impending doom, the team got to work. Ryland focused on the reactor's schematics, his stomach a tight knot of anxiety and caffeine. Tweaking a black hole reactor wasn't just playing with fire, it was playing with a nuclear-powered bonfire while wearing a gasoline suit. Taran was a whirlwind of activity, her fingers dancing over the keyboard with relentless determination. "You know, if I'd known we were going to be pioneering death rays, I might have paid more attention in science class." "Surprise," Ryland said. "Turns out all those chemistry classes were just prep for not dying horribly." Griggs hovered like a nervous vulture, occasionally muttering something about safety protocols that everyone knew wouldn't save them. "You sure about this, Ryland?" Ryland shrugged, adjusting variables like a mad conductor orchestrating a symphony of destruction. "As sure as I am that the universe has a cruel sense of humor." "Which is to say, not very." The city shuddered with each alien attack, the vibrations reminding them just how thin the line was between life and obliteration. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was a spark, a whisper of hope, or maybe it was just adrenaline-fueled insanity. Hard to tell the difference these days. Taran glanced up, her eyes meeting Ryland's. "You know, if this works, we might have to start calling you a genius. Or dead," Ryland replied, grinning despite himself. "But hey, I'll take whatever fame I can get." As they worked, reports from other parts of the city painted a grim picture. Vortican was a battered fortress on the verge of collapse. The aliens were relentless, their ships an ominous presence in the sky, overshadowing even the bravest attempts at resistance. "Looks like they're gearing up for another big push," Taran said, nodding toward the status reports scrolling across her screen. "Then we'd better be ready to push back harder," Ryland replied, feeling his resolve harden like quick-setting cement. "This is it. We either turn the tables or flip them over and start a new game." Griggs, forever the pessimist, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "And if we fail?" Taran shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. Then at least we'll go out with a bang. A big, irradiated bang. It was getting close to crunch time, the moment when plans transitioned from theory to practice, from maybe to right bloody now. Rylan made the final adjustments, the reactor humming ominously in anticipation of its new role as a makeshift weapon. "Ready as we'll ever be," he declared, the words a declaration of war against doubt and despair. Taran nodded, her fingers steady as she prepared to execute the sequence. "Griggs, you might want to find a nice, sturdy table to hide under," Griggs snorted, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "If we pull this off, I'll find a table and dance on it." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "And if we don't?" Griggs shrugged, his expression one of weary acceptance. "Then I'll haunt you both as a testament to bad decision-making." With a countdown that felt both too fast and excruciatingly slow, Rylan activated the sequence. The reactor roared to life, a beast awakened, its power harnessed and directed toward a singular goal: survival. The plan was simple and insane, a true hallmark of human ingenuity. Taran watched the screens with laser focus, monitoring the reactor's output. "Radiation levels are stable," she reported, her voice a calm oasis in the storm. "Screen and broadcast the signal," Rylan instructed, his heart pounding like a war drum. "Let's see if aliens really do have a sense of humor." As the radiation pulsed outward, the city's systems lit up with activity. It was a frantic dance of energy and desperation, a last-ditch effort to turn a losing battle into a fighting chance. The radiation hit the alien ships like a shockwave, scrambling their systems, disrupting their communications. "They're faltering," Taran said, incredulous excitement breaking through her steely demeanor. "It's actually working." For a moment, disbelief hung in the air before giving way to a collective cheer. Griggs clapped Rylan on the shoulder, his face alight with unexpected hope. "You might just be the savior we didn't know we needed." "I'll settle for the guy who didn't get us killed," Rylan replied, though his grin betrayed his satisfaction. Outside, the alien fleet was in disarray, their formations crumbling like a house of cards in a windstorm. Vortigern's defenders seized the opportunity, rallying with newfound vigor to drive the invaders back. "Let's keep the pressure on," Griggs said, the tide of battle finally turning in their favor. "We've got them on the ropes," Taran nodded, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she coordinated the city's defense. "If we can hold them off long enough, we might just make it out of this alive." Rylan watched the screens, his heart swelling with cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, they'd turn the tide. The future was uncertain and the threat of retaliation loomed large, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they'd found a glimmer of hope. As the battle raged on, the command hub became a whirlwind of activity, each team member focused on their task. It was organized chaos, a testament to human resilience and stubbornness. "Looks like they're pulling back," Taran reported, her voice tinged with disbelief. "We've actually done it." The sense of victory was palpable, a tangible shift in the atmosphere. Griggs looked around, his expression a mix of pride and relief. "You've all done something incredible here, but let's not get too comfortable. We've bought ourselves some time, but they'll be back." Rylan nodded, the weight of responsibility settling back onto his shoulders, but this time it felt different, lighter, buoyed by the knowledge that they'd achieved the impossible. "Then we better make the most of it." Taran leaned back, a satisfied grin on her face. "I say we start with a celebratory drink." "Agreed," Rylan said, already imagining the taste of victory and whiskey on his tongue. Griggs chuckled, the sound carrying a note of genuine happiness. "Just save some for me or I'll haunt you both." With the immediate threat dissipated, the command hub settled into a quieter rhythm. They'd survived the day, and though the future remained uncertain, they were ready to face whatever came next. Because in the end, humans were nothing if not survivors. And if the universe wanted a fight, Rylan and his team were more than willing to oblige. The reactor room buzzed with nervous energy, the kind you get right before doing something monumentally stupid or miraculously brilliant. Rylan, Taran, and Griggs huddled in the command hub, their eyes glued to the flickering screens displaying the alien fleet slowly assembling in the skies over Vortican. It was like watching an interstellar version of a high school bully gang up on the nerdy kid, only this time the nerds had a death ray. "All right," Griggs announced, tugging at his collar like a man awaiting execution. "The aliens are lining up for their victory parade. Let's show them how we throw a party." Rylan nodded, though his stomach felt like it was hosting an Olympic gymnastics event. "I'm ready to make them regret not staying home and watching alien soap operas. Taran, you good?" Taran's fingers hovered over the keyboard, poised like a viper ready to strike. "Born ready, Rylan. Let's make history or at least get a chapter in a disaster memoir." "Good, because I'm about to flip the switch," Rylan said, a bead of sweat tracing down his brow like it was training for a marathon. "If anything goes wrong, blame physics." Griggs chuckled darkly. "Or you, since you're the one touching the controls." The plan was simple in the way that only lunacy could be. Use the reactor's manipulated radiation to confound the alien fleet, sending their systems into a tailspin. It was risky, foolhardy, and the best idea they had. With a deep breath, Rylan initiated the sequence. The reactor hummed with power, a caged beast ready to unleash its fury. "Here goes nothing, or everything, depending on how you look at it." Taran's eyes scanned the screen, her focus unyielding. "Radiation levels are nominal, for now." "Right, let's kick this off," Rylan said, activating the directional emitters. The screens lit up as the radiation beams surged forward, painting the sky with an invisible force designed to turn alien circuits into soup. The first few moments were agony, a pregnant pause that felt like it stretched into eternity. Then, as if the universe finally decided to throw them a bone, the alien ships began to stutter in the sky, their movements erratic and clumsy, like a drunk trying to tango. "They're losing coordination," Taran shouted, barely able to contain her excitement. "Looks like their fancy tech isn't fond of our homemade radiation cocktail." Rylan slammed his hand on the console, a victorious grin breaking through his tension. "I knew it. They came for a fight and we gave them a dance-off instead." Griggs, still hovering like a skeptical owl, allowed himself a rare smile. "Color me impressed, Rylan. I might have to start calling you a genius." "Just call me the guy who didn't blow us up," Rylan replied, though the compliment felt good in a world where survival was the only currency. Outside, the alien fleet was in disarray, their once formidable formations now scattered like confetti in a windstorm. Human defenders, emboldened by the sudden turn of events, rallied with renewed vigor. Taran glanced at Rylan, her eyes alight with adrenaline-fueled mischief. "You know, if this keeps up, we might actually live to see another day." "Or at least until the next shift," Rylan quipped, though hope was a welcome guest in his heart. Reports from other sectors of the city poured in, each one a testament to the unfolding chaos in the alien ranks. The attackers were retreating, their ships darting away from the radiation like startled fish from a net. Griggs, ever the realist, brought them back to Earth. "Don't get too comfortable. They'll be back, and next time they'll have countermeasures." Rylan nodded, already planning future contingencies. "We'll be ready." Or as ready as humans can be when facing cosmic entities with a superiority complex. As the alien fleet withdrew, the command hub erupted in cheers, a wave of relief washing over its occupants. It was a surreal moment, a fleeting taste of victory in a war far from over. "Let's keep the pressure on," Griggs urged, ever the pragmatist. "We've got the momentum, let's not waste it." Taran was already typing furiously, coordinating the efforts of the city's defense with a newfound intensity. "I'll redirect power to the shield systems. We'll need them up and running for the next round." Rylan watched her work, his mind a storm of possibilities and what-ifs. For now, they'd won a battle, but the war loomed large. "Make sure we have enough juice for another round of screw you aliens." The command hub settled into a rhythm of cautious optimism, each team member focused on fortifying their gains. It was a delicate dance of hope and preparation, a testament to human tenacity in the face of overwhelming odds. Rylan allowed himself a moment to breathe, to savor the fact that he hadn't inadvertently vaporized the city. You know, if this keeps up, I might start believing we can actually make it through this. Taryn smirked, a wry twinkle in her eye. Don't get too cocky, Rylan. The universe loves a good cosmic joke, and we're the punchline. Griggs joined them, his demeanor a mix of relief and exhaustion. All right, folks, we've bought ourselves some time. Let's use it wisely. Debrief in an hour. And someone get me a drink, I'm parched. The team dispersed, each member tending to their duties with a sense of purpose that had been absent before. They were survivors, fighters in a war they hadn't asked for but were determined to win. As the hours passed, Vortigern slowly came back to life. The city, battered but not broken, was a testament to resilience in the face of annihilation. Repairs were underway, defenses fortified, and plans laid for the inevitable return of the alien threat. Ryland found himself wandering the corridors, his thoughts a swirling mess of triumph and trepidation. They'd achieved the impossible, but the weight of their actions was a constant reminder that the fight was far from over. He found Taryn in the break room, nursing a cup of coffee like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Hey," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Hell of a day." She raised an eyebrow, offering a sardonic grin. "You could say that. Almost makes you miss the quiet days of paperwork and routine reactor checks." "Almost," Rylan agreed, though the thought of normalcy was a distant dream. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared experience a comforting presence. They'd faced death and lived to tell the tale, and that bond was a powerful thing. "Think we'll ever get a moment's peace?" Taryn asked, her tone more curious than hopeful. "Probably not," Rylan replied, a crooked smile on his lips. "But if we did, we wouldn't know what to do with it." Griggs entered, a small bottle of something suspiciously alcoholic in hand. "Well, here's to a day we didn't die," he announced, raising the bottle like a ceremonial goblet. Rylan chuckled, accepting the makeshift toast. "To survival, then. May we keep baffling aliens and not blowing ourselves up." They clinked their cups together, a small but significant gesture of camaraderie and defiance. The universe might be a hostile, indifferent place, but they had each other, and that was something. As they sipped their drinks, the conversation turned lighter, jokes and stories flowing freely. They were a team, forged in the fires of chaos and uncertainty, and if the universe wanted a fight, they were more than ready to deliver. The hours ticked by, and as the city settled into a tentative peace, Ryland felt a renewed sense of purpose. They'd faced the impossible and come out the other side, and while the future was uncertain, he knew they'd face it head-on. Because in the end, humans were resilient, stubborn, and fiercely determined. And if the universe hadn't learned that by now, well, it was about to get a brutal education. As the night wore on, Ryland found himself back at the reactor, the hum of machinery a comforting lullaby. The battle was over, but the war was far from won, and he was ready for whatever came next. "Bring it on," he muttered to the empty room, a challenge to fate itself. "We're not done yet." With a final glance at the reactor, Ryland turned away, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. The fight wasn't over, but neither was their resolve, and in the vast, uncaring cosmos, that was all they needed. For now, at least, they'd survived, and that was a victory worth savoring. Ryland Zephyr stood atop the rubble of what used to be the command hub with a look that could have been mistaken for pride, if you squinted just right and ignored the fact his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep and a tad too much caffeine. Around him, Vortigern buzzed with the energy of reconstruction, a symphony of clanging metal and shouted orders that was, thankfully, devoid of explosions for now. "Well, if I didn't know better," Ryland said, arms crossed, "I'd say we did a half-decent job of not dying." Taryn Delacroix, standing beside him and sipping something that suspiciously resembled coffee but smelled like burnt toast, snorted. "Half-decent might be pushing it, but we're not cosmic dust, so that's a win in my book." She eyed the workers scrambling like ants across the broken landscape, patching up the gaping holes that the alien fleet had kindly left behind. It was a city-wide jigsaw puzzle where none of the pieces fit, but damned if they weren't going to make it work somehow. "Think they'll figure out which end of the wrench to use," Rylan quipped, watching a particularly enthusiastic worker trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Taryn rolled her eyes. "Hope springs eternal, Rylan. Maybe they'll invent a new shape that works better." "Behold the squircle. Seems about right," he mused, absently rubbing a hand over the console operator's badge that now felt like it had earned him a few stripes in this odd little war. "We're all about inventing new things these days. New ways to tick off aliens, new ways to not blow ourselves up, and new ways to survive," Taryn added, her voice softer, the sardonic edge momentarily dulled. "That's something, right?" He glanced at her, caught off guard by the sincerity tucked amidst the sarcasm. "Yeah," he admitted, "it's definitely something." As if on cue, Supervisor Griggs sauntered over, looking every bit like a man who just successfully defused a bomb with nothing but a rubber band and a prayer. Which, given their line of work, wasn't entirely inaccurate. "How's our dynamic duo?" Griggs asked, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards in what he might have considered a smile. "Still alive," Ryland said, "and still here to make your life difficult." Griggs chuckled, a sound like gravel tumbling down a tin roof. "You've got a knack for that, Rylan, and somehow it's your biggest asset." Taryn smirked, giving Rylan an elbow nudge that nearly sent him toppling into a nearby crater. "Careful, don't inflate his ego. We'll need to build another command hub just to fit it." Rylan waved her off, a half-hearted gesture that was betrayed by the genuine amusement in his eyes. "Hey, if I'm going to be a hero, I might as well play the part." "Hero." "More like the idiot who got lucky," Griggs said, but there was no malice in his voice, just the kind of begrudging respect you give to someone who's pulled off the impossible by the skin of their teeth. "Speaking of which," Griggs continued, his tone shifting to something a little more serious, "the Council wants to recognize our efforts." Taryn raised an eyebrow, leaning on her coffee cup like it was a lifeline. "Efforts? You mean not vaporizing the city counts as efforts now?" "Apparently so," Griggs said, his expression torn between amusement and exasperation. "They're planning some kind of ceremony. Medals, speeches, the whole shebang." Rylan groaned, tipping his head back to stare at the sky, as if hoping a piece of ceiling would conveniently fall and spare him from the ordeal. "Great, more pomp and circumstance. Just what I need in my life." Taryn chuckled, the sound low and rich like dark chocolate with a hint of chili. "Face it, Rylan, you're a hero now. Embrace the awkward speeches and uncomfortable suits." He made a face that suggested he'd rather embrace a cactus. "Fine, fine, but if they start calling us the saviors of Vortican, I'm out." Griggs shook his head, a smile playing at the edges of his lips. "You'll survive, Rylan. Besides, a little recognition never hurt anyone." Rylan grunted, unconvinced but willing to play along. After all, they had pulled off the improbable, thrown a cosmic wrench into the alien machinery, and lived to see another sunrise. That had to count for something. "So what now?" Taryn asked, her gaze sweeping over the organized chaos that was slowly, painfully transforming the city back into something resembling normalcy. Griggs shrugged, the movement as weary as it was resigned. "We keep going. We rebuild. We prepare because those aliens will be back, and next time they won't underestimate us. Then we'll just have to be ready to surprise them again," Ryland said, determination threading through his voice like steel. "We're good at that." Taryn bumped his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and shared purpose. "Here's to being unpredictable nuisances in the universe. And here's to doing what they said couldn't be done," Griggs added, his gaze far away for a moment, as if seeing beyond the here and now to the battles yet to come. Rylan, Taryn, and Griggs stood there for a moment longer, three figures amidst a landscape of destruction and defiance, united by the stubborn refusal to give in. "Well," Ryland said finally, breaking the silence with a lopsided grin, "I guess I should get back to pretending I know what I'm doing." Taran snorted, a sound of amusement and affection all rolled into one. Keep pretending, Rylan. It's worked for us so far. With that, they parted ways, each heading back into the fray of reconstruction and resilience, the quiet hum of hope beneath the noise of labor and life. As the days turned into weeks, Vortigern rose from the ashes of its near destruction like a phoenix, albeit one that was held together with duct tape and sheer determination. The people moved with a purpose that was as relentless as it was hopeful, driven by the knowledge that they'd faced the darkness and survived. Ryland found himself back at the reactor more often than not, the familiar hum of its machinery both a comfort and a reminder of the power they wielded, and the responsibility that came with it. "Hey, hero," Taran's voice called out as she entered the control room, her presence a welcome interruption to his thoughts. "Fancy seeing you here." Ryland glanced up, offering a wry smile. "Apparently I'm supposed to keep an eye on things. Something about not wanting to blow up the city again." "Right," she said, rolling her eyes in mock exasperation. "Wouldn't want to ruin our spotless record." He chuckled, resting his elbows on the console that had become an unexpected bastion of victory. "You know, for all the chaos, I think we did all right." "We did more than all right," Taran corrected, her gaze steady and sure. "We changed the game." Ryland nodded, the weight of their accomplishment settling on his shoulders like a cloak. "And we'll keep changing it as long as we're here." She grinned, a spark of mischief lighting her eyes. "Ready for round 2 with our extraterrestrial dance partners?" "Always," he replied, the word a promise and a challenge all at once. "They can try to knock us down, but we're not going anywhere." Taran raised her imaginary glass, a toast to their continued defiance, to the unpredictable nuisances of the universe. "To us," Rylan agreed, the words carrying a conviction that rang true in the air. "And may we never stop surprising them." With that, they returned to the task at hand, their shared resolve a beacon against the uncertainty that lay ahead. Because in a universe that was as vast as it was hostile, they'd found their place, defenders of a fragile world, united by the unyielding spirit of survival. And if the aliens thought they could snuff that out, they were in for a rude awakening. Because Ryland, Taran, and the rest of Vortigern weren't just survivors, they were fighters, resilient and resourceful and more than capable of holding their own. So let the universe throw what it would at them. They'd stand tall, heads high and hearts defiant, ready for whatever came next. After all, they'd faced death, destruction, and the unknown, and emerged stronger for it. And if that wasn't worth celebrating, Ryland didn't know what was. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Ryland took a moment to breathe in the future they'd fought for, a future that was theirs to shape, to defend, and to celebrate. And with Taran by his side, ready to face the next challenge with a sarcastic quip and a steely determination, he knew one thing for certain: they were far from finished. The universe had better watch out.